This is another composition that I played with a little bit last year. Last year I really focused in on the piece of wood there. I couldn't have dreamed that it would still be here. I thought all the storms would have broken it up and washed it away. What's different about this year compared to last year is a bit more of the beach in the foreground is exposed. So I can use that as an interesting leading line and play with that as a kind of graphical element within the composition. It's quite still, but there are stormy clouds going through, so you get lots of amazing light patterns, occasional rainbows. But I'll talk you through my composition. So I've spent a little bit of time playing with this, and there were a few things that were bothering me about this before I composed it very carefully. So there are two stones in the bottom right hand corner of the composition. Those stones are a nice anchor point, but there was a third stone. However, I composed it was casting a shadow into the scene, which I didn't like, so I moved that stone. I'm currently waiting for the sun to go in because the light's a little bit too harsh, and this element in the foreground here, this outcrop of pinky white rocks, really grabs your attention. The balance of tones isn't quite right while that has direct light on it. So I've been taking photos whenever the light goes in. Unfortunately, when the light's gone in so far, Stac Pollaidh, and I think it's probably Culmore, I'll check later, they tend to be in shadow at the same time as this foreground. So what I want is the foreground to be in indirect light, slightly diffuse from a cloud, and those two mountains to be bright. Possibly the one in the background could be darker and Stac Pollaidh catch the light. I think that would probably be the best way to go. The other thing that I was composing and trying to avoid was this rock in the left hand corner of my image. It didn't work at all while it was there. It grabbed too much of attention. And then the other thing that I'm being very careful of as I compose is having a little bit of the side of this hill in, but not a huge amount. I don't want it to start to drop off so that you can see the top of the hill. I want to kind of give the impression of this just moving upwards, and then obviously there's the up and down parallax motion, and actually I prefer it higher up so there's a bit more separation between this outcrop and the background. But this was a compromise between getting the shape of the sand in the foreground and enough of that extra curve there to make it work for the composition. Not wide enough. This is pretty miserable. I forgot my umbrella, which was ridiculous considering how changeable things have been, and I also don't have my seat pad, which I usually use to shield the camera while I'm shooting. So I put away the video camera because it's hard enough taking photos, let alone videoing the whole thing. And my stills camera is currently hidden under a cloth. Just waiting for Stac Pollaidh and the other peaks to become visible again, because at the moment they're just almost completely obscured by the rain in between us and them. So just gonna wait on this composition for a while, just try and keep as dry as possible, keep my gear as dry as possible, and hopefully get this shot. I mean, I love these conditions. This is exactly what I like shooting in, but for whatever reason I just didn't come equipped today. So Let's wait on it and see if I can take a photo when things clear slightly. To give you some sense of how difficult this is, I'm playing Twister here with my tripod, and the tripod's as low as it can go and as far back as it can possibly go against this ledge. It's a really, really difficult one. See if the selfie camera makes it any clearer. So that weather really was abysmal, but that is why I come to the North West Highlands for changeable weather, because the conditions just make for beautiful photos. I've got no idea whether that image came out. There's every chance that it didn't. Last year I attempted this composition and the weather was great, and it was difficult enough anyway with the tripod position, with all the rocks sticking up, higgledy-piggledy, and then add in the inclement weather and you've got yourself a really difficult situation to manage. Depth of field is also an issue, and you can't use filters because the tree spans the whole frame. Although I wanted to bring down the exposure of the sky, I had to bracket exposures, and then because the tree's moving, the movements don't quite line up in the different bracketed exposures, so it's a really tricky composition. But I think this time it might have worked better than last year. Last year I only had the 24mm. This year I swapped out my video lens and just gave myself a little bit more space to work with. I'm not sure whether I'll shoot any more images today. I really need to go out and scout a north-facing composition just in case we get clear skies and an aurora. I really want to be able to shoot a well-planned composition if that occurs. It's pretty unlikely though. I'm going to wait around here for a bit just in case the conditions change and we get some nice light again. But for today's vlog, I think we'll call it.
I was glad to revisit this tree a year on. Returning here felt like seeing an old friend. I couldn't have been happier with this image in the end. The extra 4mm made all the difference, and the driving rain all but obscured the mountains of Coigach, making for a pleasing minimalism. Once the weather had passed, I tried a few other compositions, but I wasn't thrilled by any of them. I also used the drone to scout the south side of the loch, and I found several compositions I'll return to. As I returned the drone home, I spotted a gap in the clouds on the horizon. As a landscape photographer, I should know better than to hope, but hope I did. I like shooting in the autumn. Even in the middle of the day, the light can be beautiful, especially in the mountains. The warm to cool colour contrast of the first composition works, and I'm happy enough with the image. However, sometimes you need a little bit of luck with conditions to create something truly special. It really pays to have a composition ready for when the light gives us a show. I didn't have time to do anything. I left my video camera in the bag and set up my tripod on the marks it had made earlier in the sand. The 20mm lens was still on my camera, and some of the elements I had worked hard to leave out earlier stayed in the composition to great effect here. The stones on the sand and in the water cup the composition and act as anchor points, stopping the eye from exiting the scene at the base of the image. The slither of sand in the foreground echoes the lines in the headland and the patterns in the cloud, and of course the rainbow. The edge of the mountains in the top right of the frame are softened by the rain rolling in, and become less of a distraction in this wider composition. Thank you for watching. If you like the video, please subscribe and follow the rest of my trip. I release new episodes on Saturdays at 10 AM. I'll see you there.